When we last left off, night had fallen over the White Mountains. 21-year-old Maura Murray had just vanished without a trace. It was almost as if the nursing student was seemingly swallowed up by the dark of night, evaporating into the New Hampshire wilderness like she was never there at all. The only sign that witness Butch Atwood, a local school bus driver who talked to Maura before she disappeared, hadn't completely imagined his interaction with the slight brown-haired girl with dimples, was her black Saturn that sat crumpled in an unsuspecting snowbank, abandoned along a stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. The engine was cold. The driver's side door open. There was no sign of the young woman who had been behind the wheel. Only 10 short minutes elapsed since Butch saw Maura alive on the side of the road. But in that minuscule window of time, a young woman's entire life and future was erased, and a huge mystery was beginning to take shape. Maura was like a ghost, gone, but so freshly gone that her presence still hung in the air. Maura's disappearance would fracture her family, divide investigators, and launch a mystery that had a grip on anyone who studied the case, and it still hasn't let go. For 20 years, a quiet New Hampshire town has carried the weight of one of New England's most haunting cold cases. You're listening to Mystery and Murder Analysis by Dr. Phil. This is Into Thin Air, The Disappearance of Maura Murray. The Search and Secrets. When Maura first vanished, nobody could agree on what kind of story they were dealing with. Had a crime been committed? Was Maura a runaway? Was this a simple car accident that somehow spiraled out of control? For the first 48 hours, police treated the case pretty much as routine. Local officers and state police continued to conduct additional ground and air searches around the crash site. Helicopters equipped with infrared kept scanning the surrounding woods. Snowmobiles and canine teams swept the areas. State troopers re-questioned neighbors along Route 112. Detectives checked hospitals, motels, bus stations, and shelters across New England. They also issued a statewide alert to other departments. By week's end, the New Hampshire State Police Major Crime Unit took over. The FBI was consulted briefly, but because there was no proof of a kidnapping or even evidence of a crime, they really could not stay involved. Now, you can ask yourself why. It wasn't that they didn't care, but they had zero proof Maura had been abducted or harmed. So hers remained a state case. With the FBI, you need proof a crime occurred, and it has to have certain characteristics and qualities to qualify as federal. Now, most people who have a loved one go missing want it to be in the hands of the capable FBI. They have more resources, and you'd rather have that than be left in the hands of a small town local law enforcement who maybe have seen one case like this, maybe no cases like this. It's nothing against them, but they just don't have the experience. They don't have the technology. It's kind of like you come down south and they have a snowstorm. They don't have the equipment to clear the roads like they do in Chicago or New York or somewhere up north, so you don't have the experience or the expertise or the resources to clear the roads. So you need somebody that does, and that's the way it is with small town police department. If something happens that's outside the scope of their normal activity, they could be in over their heads right away. And early mistakes at a crime scene can compromise forensics that can create havoc a year later, 2 years later, 20 years later, because of problems created in the early hours. Every hour that passed without a lead made the trail even colder and made the divide between Maura's family and these local investigators even wider. Without any evidence, the investigation slowed quickly because they had nothing to pursue. They had nothing to follow up on. Cell phone records showed no outgoing calls were made from Maura's phone. Her credit cards and ATM card had not been used, and she had cleared out the few $100s from her account when she took off, destination unknown. So there were no electronic footprints. To this day, those cards have never been used again. So what do you do when there is no evidence, no proof, and all you are left with are possibilities, theories, speculation? You take what you know, as little as it is, and you start working backwards. How did you get to the point that you do know about? And I want to examine some of the main theories that emerged, and I want to dig deep and see how they hold up against what we do know about Maura's mindset in the weeks before she went missing. Her personality, and whatever unknown troubles that have been uncovered that she was facing that caused her to set off on this road trip in the first place. Now, there have been many theories and certain offshoots of those theories throughout the years, but let's focus on the major and most plausible ones. The first theory we're going to look at is that Maura just walked away to avoid speaking to authorities. To the police, it looked like the most likely scenario was that Maura had vanished on purpose. She disappeared by choice. They were viewing Maura as a missing adult, possibly, likely, voluntarily. Police and justice are saying usually the simplest answer is the answer. It's the principle of parsimony. You look for the simplest explanation with the fewest moving parts, and it most often will be correct. So investigators lean toward what they saw as the logical explanation. Maura had likely willingly run away. Now, why? Well, there are a lot of reasons why. There was no blood at the scene, no broken glass, no sign of a struggle. Her car was locked, her belongings intact, and there was alcohol inside. Now, police thought maybe she had crashed, gotten scared, and left the scene on foot before officers arrived. If there was alcohol inside, maybe she thought, I've been drinking. Maybe they're going to show up, give me a field sobriety test. I fail, get arrested for DUI. So I don't want to be here when they show up. So they think maybe she thought it's better to leave. That's why the search initially focused on the woods. It's a theory that on paper would make sense. Now, since she had been stressed, and the theory is she was running away to start with, she was leaving her troubles behind, mindset-wise, it would make sense that she would behave consistent with that. And if she was running away from her life, why wouldn't she run away from the crash? If that's where her head was at the time, if that was her problem-solving set, then it would be consistent. She was already, in her mind at least, in trouble for crashing her dad's car, if you'll remember. And here she was having another accident. And that might be something she was desperate to avoid. So she's thinking, oh my God, I crashed my dad's car, now I've crashed my car. I just don't want to deal with this. I'd just rather just walk away and continue my plan to just disappear. Coming up, I don't know how much you know about search dogs. They are remarkable. You know, when life gets hectic and stress starts stacking up, it's easy to overlook one of the body's most important minerals, magnesium. That's why I take Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. It's a premium formula that combines 7 forms of bioavailable magnesium along with vitamin B6 and humic and fulvic acids to help optimize absorption. Magnesium Breakthrough supports relaxation, deeper sleep, stress resilience, and muscle recovery, and even helps maintain healthy heart and bone function, all from one simple supplement. It's all natural, free from synthetic additives, and made to support your body from head to toe. So get ready to unwind, rest better, and keep your energy balanced, and try Magnesium Breakthrough. Visit bioptimizers.com/Dr. Phil and use promo code Dr. Phil for 15% off and 25% off during Black Friday. Because when your body gets the right kind of magnesium, everything just works better. She had also lied to her professors about a death in the family. She had packed her car with clothes and toiletries, and she had withdrawn almost all of her cash. To investigators, it looked like she had planned to go somewhere, maybe Vermont, maybe the mountains, and just kind of drop out, be alone. So, to avoid police and continue to make her way wherever she was going, maybe she walked into the woods with the idea of hiding out of sight, and then got lost, miscalculated the harshness of the conditions, didn't figure on animals. Her family saw it differently. Fred Murray called that theory ridiculous. He told reporters if she was walking away, she would have been found. Now, why would he think that? Well, if you're walking away and it's on rough terrain and there's snow on the ground, the best you're going to do, experts tell me, is 2 to 3 miles an hour. Think about it. You know, there's snow on the ground. It's not a path. It's not a trail. So you're walking into the woods. The best you're going to do is 2 or 3 miles an hour. And they started looking for her right away. So say 2 hours, best case, she was still within a 3 or 4 mile radius. They didn't see anything. If she was walking away, she would have been found. Fred just felt like that's crazy. It's not that big an area with dogs and search parties and helicopters. His theory, somebody stopped and took her. That divide between family and police, runaway versus abduction, became the line that split this case in half. Fred Murray demanded a full criminal probe. He insisted the car scene look staged. He said it was too perfect, too obvious. The spilled wine, the missing backpack. None of it felt right to him. These were the two dueling perspectives, foul play versus vanished of her own free will. And if she vanished of her own free will, why was there never any use of credit card, debit card, nothing? But both missing the same crucial thing, any kind of hard proof. The next popular theory, the one that Fred believed, was that between the time when Maura spoke to Butch and the first officer arrived on the scene, Maura was picked up by another vehicle. Now, there is some support for this theory, and the biggest clue indicating Maura got into someone else's car came from the canines searching the scene. When a person disappears, investigators have one powerful ally, one that doesn't rely on interviews, assumptions, memory. It's the nose of a trained search and rescue dog. And in the case of Maura Murray, those canines were the first to tell a story. And you say, well, how much can you rely on a dumb dog? Well, let me tell you, the part of the brain that a dog uses to pick up a scent, percentage-wise, is 40 times bigger than it is in the human brain. 40 times bigger. That's one of their primary ways to exist in the world. It is their superpower. And it was a short story, one that started at her crashed Saturn and ended just 100 yards away in the middle of the road. Now, I don't know how much you know about search dogs. They are remarkable. They take that 40 times bigger scent part of the brain, and they can track what humans can't even imagine detecting. Every person carries a unique scent signature made up of a mix of skin cells, oils, microscopic particles that drift off the body and linger in the air. And when someone goes missing, dogs can tell which direction they walked, confirm whether they were at a specific location, and sometimes even find their remains when all other leads go cold. They call those dogs cadaver dogs. But in Maura's case, what they found and what they didn't only deepened the mystery. By the time search teams mobilized on February 10th, nearly 12 hours had passed since Maura's car was discovered, abandoned on Route 112. The weather was frigid. Snow had fallen. Plows had already cleared paths on the road, but the New Hampshire State Police brought in canine units anyway, hoping the scent might succeed where sight had failed. Handlers reportedly used a pair of gloves found in Maura's car as the reference scent, although later some questioned whether those gloves were even hers or could have been new ones purchased from a store. Either way, the dogs started their work at the Saturn's driver's side door. The first dog picked up Maura's scent almost immediately and began moving east along the road away from the crash. For about 100 yards, the dog followed the trail confidently until suddenly it stopped. Right there, middle of the road. The handler circled the area, tried again, but sure enough, the scent was gone. Not near the woods, not at a riverbank, right in the middle of the pavement. Now that doesn't happen naturally. Scents fade slowly. They don't vanish all at once unless something breaks the trail. Now, what's the most obvious explanation here? What would break the trail in the middle of the road? Well, of course, it's another vehicle. That scent trail disappears if Maura stops, gets into another vehicle, and they drive away. Think about that. You're tracking someone's scent through the snow and it just cuts off in the middle of the road. You've either been beamed up or someone picked that person up and drove away. If you're an investigator, that's going to set off alarms because it tells you she didn't just wander off and freeze. She left that spot where the trail ends inside a car. Coming up, the question attached to this theory became, who could have given Maura a ride? Allergies can pop up anytime, and this year, they're hitting harder and lasting longer than ever. That means restless nights, sneezing, coughing, and that miserable post-nasal drip that keeps you awake. But there is a solution: Sambrosa Night Syrup. It's made without dyes, synthetic colors, artificial flavors, or high fructose corn syrup. Just a base of nutrient-rich honey, 7 organic herbs, and a small dose of antihistamine that help you breathe easier and sleep deeply. It's soothing yet effective without the harsh side effects. So try it and get allergy relief to get your best night's sleep and wake up rested. Sambrosa Night Syrup is a balanced formula that ensures you wake up energized. Visit Sambrosa.com and use code Dr. Phil for 25% off your first order. With a 90-day guarantee, there's no reason for you not to get the help you need. That's Sambrosa.com, code Dr. Phil for 25% off. The dogs found no trail into the woods, no sign she had walked into the trees. Just the abrupt end of a path that seemed to vanish into thin air or into a car. The finding became one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the entire case because if the dog was right, then Maura didn't wander into the forest. She may have left the scene in another vehicle. Now, you think, well, problem solved. That's just the beginning. I've seen in a lot of cases when a scent ends abruptly on pavement, it's often because a person got into a car. That's not proof, it's a possibility. The science behind those scent trails is complicated. By the time those dogs were deployed, the trail was already at least a day old. Temperatures had dropped into the teens, snow had covered and melted in patches. The road had been salted, the road had been plowed. Every one of those factors destroys evidence. Even the best dog can only track what's still there to find. And experts say when a dog finds someone, that's reliable. But when a dog loses a scent, that doesn't mean the person didn't go that way. It could just mean the scent went away. Now, public records from that week confirm that multiple canine units were deployed between February 10th and 11th. Handlers worked both sides of the crash site, sweeping through the snow and brush and even retesting the scent hours apart. But despite dozens of personnel and multiple scent articles, no dog tracked Maura beyond that 100-yard mark. Now, to investigators, that short scent trail was a strong clue. It hinted that Maura didn't collapse nearby or die in the woods or succumb to the elements. It supported the theory that she left that scene willingly or otherwise in a vehicle. Now, Fred Murray had said many times that he believes Maura got into a car that night, maybe with someone she trusted, maybe with someone she shouldn't have. Either way, he believes that was her fatal mistake. The dog's track, stopping cold in the middle of Route 112, is what keeps that theory alive. To this day, there are no additional confirmed tracks, no secondary scent hits, and no further evidence that Maura ever left that area on foot. Just a single 100-yard path from her car to nowhere. That scent disappeared, leaving a void. And in that void, every theory, every possibility, every fear takes root. The question attached to this theory became, who? Who could have given Maura a ride? Was it someone she knew or a stranger? And did that person harm her? If Maura did get into another vehicle, no one saw it happen. Bruce Atwood said he never saw another car pass. Understand, we're out in the sticks here. This is not an area where there's traffic. There's not 10 cars going by an hour. Sometimes there may not be 5 cars go by a night. It's deserted. Faith Westman, the neighbor who called 911, saw headlights that night, presumably Maura's, before she crashed, but reports that she saw no one else leaving the scene. Police questioned other nearby residents. One said she thought she saw a man smoking in a vehicle parked down the road. Another mentioned hearing voices outside, but none of those leads held up. Is it possible she was picked up even with 2 sets of eyes watching? Could it have happened in the dark in a moment? Neighbors glancing out of the window from a distance might have missed? If she was, whoever stopped did it fast, quiet, and unnoticed, which is possible, because if it's really cold outside and she's walking and somebody pulls up in a warm car and says, "Hey, do you need help?" She's freezing out there. She may say, "Oh, hell yes," and hopped in quickly. The idea that Maura had gotten into another vehicle birthed another theory. Maybe Maura wasn't traveling alone. Every major mystery has that one theory, the one that just won't go away, the one that seems to answer the unanswerable. In the disappearance of Maura Murray, that theory is known as the tandem driver. The tandem driver theory suggests that Maura wasn't alone on that drive to New Hampshire. Maybe she was following someone. Maybe someone was following her. Or maybe someone she knew had gone on ahead waiting for her to catch up. Investigative journalist James Renner helped popularize this idea. He proposed that Maura and another driver had planned to meet or even caravan north that Monday afternoon. According to Renner, that second driver could have seen the crash in the rearview mirror, turned around, picked her up, and disappeared down the road before police arrived. Sounds far-fetched until you look at the scent dog evidence. The theory also fits the timeline. There were no footprints leading into the woods. No drag marks, no sign of a struggle. For many armchair detectives, there's only one way to explain that she got into another car willingly. Some picture a friend, maybe another UMass student, traveling with her in a separate car that's called a tandem trip. Others imagine someone she had met online or through mutual friends, someone she trusted enough to follow into the mountains. The tandem driver theory has endured because it makes some sense emotionally. It gives the disappearance a logic that the official version just doesn't. Now, it kind of explains the missing scent, the clean scene, and the eerie 10-minute window. The reason I say kinda is if this was a co-traveler, why did they stop 100 yards from the crash site? Why would she start walking if she knows there's someone there to give her a ride? 100 yards is the length of a football field. Think about that. That's a pretty long way. If you know somebody is going to pick you up, if they were ahead of her, why wouldn't she call? If they were behind her and she knew they were soon to catch up, why wouldn't she sit in the warmth of her car instead of walking the length of a football field down a dark road? If she knew she had a travel partner, why wouldn't she tell Butch? When he offered help, she said, no, I'm traveling with a friend and they're just a few minutes behind and they're going to give me a ride. So it kind of explains the 100-yard disappearance theory, but it also asks more questions than it answers. And it is just a theory. Police say there's no witness, no second set of tire impressions. So if there was a second car, why didn't we see their tire tracks? There's no forensic evidence, there's no surveillance video that supports a second vehicle. I've seen cases where silence from investigators feeds the fire more than anything else. When people don't get answers, they start making their own. And once a theory like this takes root, it doesn't need proof to survive. It just creates doubt. If there really was another car out there that night, someone Maura trusted enough to follow or travel with in tandem, then this wasn't a random disappearance at all. It was planned, coordinated, maybe even prearranged. And if that's true, then someone out there knows exactly what happened to her. Nearly 21 years later, the tandem driver theory remains one of the most polarizing parts of this mystery. It could explain everything, or nothing. We don't know who that driver might have been. We don't know if they even existed. What we do know is that Maura's trail ended in the middle of that frozen road, and that's where this theory begins. Her father, Fred Murray, has never wavered. From day one, he was effectively shouting from the rooftops. He knew his daughter, no one else did. He knew she wouldn't run away and put her family through this. He doesn't buy that she got into the car with someone she hoped would help her run away and escape her life, whether she knew them or not. Fred told reporters, and I quote, "My daughter didn't run away. Somebody took her." Imagine knowing that in your soul, in your gut as a parent from day one. Now, we know that she had a pretty close relationship with her father. We know that they were in communication. This wasn't an arm's length, estranged relationship. Parents know their kids. They have a feeling for them, whether they're alive or dead. Instinct is that real phenomenon. Maybe he's in denial. Maybe he doesn't want to recognize the truth here. But 21 years is a long time to hold on to a fiction. Those were the major theories. She walked away alone to avoid trouble and succumbed to the elements, or she got in the car with someone she didn't know who harmed her, or got into a car with someone she knew, someone who somehow was part of the bigger plan. Now, while investigators pondered which theory was most likely, they started thinking about who might have useful information to give them. When you deal with a missing person investigation, the first hours are everything, but they can also be very confusing, very confounding, very contradictory. You don't know what you don't know, and that uncertainty can send an investigation on a wild goose chase that can lead to another wild goose chase, can send you down the wrong road, and while you're going down the wrong road, you're not going down the right road, and that road is getting cold. With no body, no crime scene, no digital trail, detectives started circling the people closest to Maura And who is that? Well, it's family, friends, romantic partners. Statistically, those are the people who have opportunity. Statistically, those are the people most likely to hold the key to what really happened. In Maura Murray's case, the first person investigators needed to speak to was Bill Rausch, Maura's long-distance boyfriend. Now, we all know in a crime like these, the first person investigators look at is the significant other, whether it's a spouse, boyfriend, lover, whatever. You'll remember people had said things were a bit rocky between Maura and Bill, so let me tell you what happens when they're looking at someone like a boyfriend. They call him in for an interview. Here's what they're looking for. They look for not just what he says, but how he says it. They're looking for inconsistencies in the story. They're looking for signs of guilt, refusal to cooperate. There are signs that set off warning bells. Some are subtle, some are big. Big ones are inconsistencies in the story, things they say that don't check out in their alibis. Some are subtle, like they refer to their loved one in the past tense, for example. They don't use the person's name. They refer to them as she or her instead of Maura. The story is too rehearsed, it's too practiced. They look for things they leave out, like fights, arguments, threats. They look for aggressive language in text messages, things like that. When Maura disappeared in February of 2004, Bill Rausch was a 25-year-old Army lieutenant stationed a long way away at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. The two had met years earlier at West Point, and they dated all through college and stayed together after Maura had left the academy and transferred to UMass Amherst. It wasn't an easy relationship. Friends described them as serious, but often strained. A lot of long-distance phone calls, constant travel, jealousy, the kind of tension that builds when two young lives move in opposite directions. Still, to everyone around them, they were a couple. They were planning for the future. Bill told friends he expected Maura to visit soon. Maura had told classmates she very much loved Bill. Within 24 hours of learning Maura was missing, Bill flew from Oklahoma to New Hampshire, which means when this happened, he was in Oklahoma. That's a couple of thousand miles away. Pretty good alibi. He joined the Murray family on the ground, meeting with police, helping organize search parties, and giving interviews to the media. He sat for questioning with the investigators, turned over his phone records, and cooperated fully. Police took a public position. They said they had no reason to believe he was involved in Maura's disappearance. On paper, he did everything right. But that didn't stop speculation. The first red flag for some followers of this case came from the phone records. In the days before Maura's disappearance, the two had exchanged multiple calls and emails. Some were affectionate, others were tense. Investigators have never released those messages in full, but what's known is that the communication was inconsistent, short, clipped, sometimes unanswered. On the night she disappeared, Bill left Maura several voicemails. One, he said later, ended up playing automatically when her phone was briefly powered on after the crash. Something that only deepened the mystery. To conspiracy theorists, that suggested someone other than Maura had turned on the phone. To police, it meant little. Cell phones sometimes reconnect automatically when power fluctuates. Still, that one small detail became fuel for suspicion. In the years that followed, the internet began dissecting every word, every photo, every action Bill Rausch took. They asked, why did he fly to New Hampshire so quickly? Why did he call the police so often? Why did his story sound so polished when he spoke to reporters? Online sleuths accused him of trying to control the narrative, inserting himself into the investigation too aggressively. Others pointed to his later life, where allegations of harassment and misconduct surfaced years after Maura's disappearance, and used that to paint a retroactive picture of guilt. But correlation is not causation. Nothing in those later accusations tied him to Maura's case, and no evidence ever placed him anywhere near the scene. I suppose it's human nature. When a case drags on this long without answers, people start connecting dots that maybe shouldn't be connected at all. A pattern becomes a story. And then that story, if you're unencumbered by facts or reality, can take on a life of its own. The hard evidence, sadly, paints a very different picture. Phone records confirm that on the day Maura disappeared, Bill Rausch was at Fort Sill. Like I say, it's between 1,500 and 2,000 miles away. Witnesses verified his presence there. People that have no investment in this case say, yeah, he was there. I saw him. He was at Fort Sill. He didn't leave until after learning she was missing. There are no fingerprints, no DNA, no physical trace linking him to Maura's car or the crash site. Police repeatedly stated he was never a suspect and that his cooperation was consistent from day one. So why does suspicion linger? Because when the facts end, the human mind looks for motive. And in a story this empty, motive is the only thing left to fill in the void. Look, people don't like unsolved mysteries. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. They want a villain. They want somebody to blame. They want resolution. And in a case where every physical lead evaporates, attention naturally turns to the people closest to Maura, starting with Bill. Every action is reinterpreted, his choice of words, his tone in interviews, his posture at the press. But that says more about who's looking at it than it does about who's being looked at. Her own family says he was devastated. Now, we don't know what they talked about in those last phone calls, but what we do know is they were long distance. Did they argue? Couples do. What we know for damn sure is that he was not in New Hampshire. He didn't pick her up. He didn't make her disappear. The whispers, the insinuations, they're just built on people's need for resolution. In 2019, several women came forward online accusing Bill Rausch of harassment and misconduct. The claims dated back years, spanning his time in the Army and his later work in D.C. None of those accusations had anything to do with Maura Murray's disappearance. But for true crime communities, already suspicious of him, the allegations felt like confirmation, proof, they said, of a darker side. They pointed to the pattern, control, manipulation, aggression. They asked if he could do that, what else was he capable of? That's how quickly rumor becomes reality in a court of public opinion, because when a case has been cold for 20 years, people cling to any new piece of information, even if it doesn't fit. They begin retrofitting those behaviors back into 2004, particularly if there's no standard of proof, no standard of evidence concerning what happened on that cold February night. But there's hindsight bias. Just because someone is accused of wrongdoing years later doesn't mean they're guilty of something 2 decades earlier. And no investigator, past or present, has ever said those later allegations had any connection to Maura. You need to understand, you see this with juries a lot. People don't like being unsettled. They want resolution. I think about it this way. You probably did this when you were a kid. Think about going around barefooted in the summer and you come up to a hot paved road. You start across it barefooted and you get about halfway across and you look down and you go, oh my God, my feet are on fire. What are you going to do? You can run fast ahead to the other side, or you can turn around and run fast back to where you started and get your feet off the hot pavement onto the cool grass. That relieves the pain. So you pick one side or the other. What you don't do is stand in the middle of that road and burst into flame. That's what it's like when you're unsettled. You're in the middle of that road and it's painful. You're going to pick one side or the other. That's what people do when they're in pain. They don't like being unsettled. They don't like not having answers. And so they race to one side or the other to get out of that discomfort. Now, once they do, what do you think it's going to take to get them back out onto that hot highway again to go all the way to the other side? It's really tough. So when somebody makes up their mind, even absent evidence that something has gone one way or the other, that Bill Roush is the bad guy, they're comfortable that they've got an answer. Because it was painful not knowing, like, oh, what happened? What happened? They got relief when they made a decision. Now, to get them back into that pain zone of trying to figure it out again, people get fixed. You're not going to cause them to go back into that dissonance. So they close their minds off. And that's what's happened in this case with a lot of people that are following it. A lot of people have convicted Bill Roush in their minds. But the investigation continued. So next, they had to start talking to Maura's close friends at UMass. They interviewed them. They were hoping somebody could explain what had been going on in her life before she vanished. Among them was Kate Markopoulos, a friend from UMass Amherst who had seen Maura just days earlier and told investigators she seemed really distracted, under a lot of pressure. They talked to Sarah Alvarez, another nursing student, who said Maura hadn't mentioned any plans to leave or any trouble at school. Later, detectives reached out to one of Maura's former West Point classmates, someone she had stayed in touch with online, and may have been one of the last people to speak with her before she vanished. That individual told the family that contact had never been thoroughly followed up at the time. Each of these interviews painted the same picture: a young woman who was stressed, exhausted, and juggling too much. But no one believed that she was planning to run away. Instead, they described her as someone who was trying to reset, not disappear. Detectives even examined potential drivers who might have passed her on 112. Truckers, commuters, residents. Nobody even remembered seeing her. They did remember seeing her after the crash. They dug into phone logs, emails, the days before her trip. They re-questioned the locals, including Butch Atwood, the bus driver. Every person they questioned added a piece of the puzzle, but still, nothing fit. Weeks turned into months. Frustration turned into suspicion, not just of strangers, but of law enforcement itself. Locals began whispering that the Haverhill police had mishandled the scene. Online forums accused officers of covering up mistakes, even being involved. People questioned why the car was towed so quickly, why no photographs of the interior were ever released, why it took nearly 12 months to classify Maura as missing. Theory spread that maybe an off-duty officer or someone connected to law enforcement had crossed paths with Maura that night, and a rumor with no evidence, but one that refused to die, just kept being passed around. But in a mystery this old, even the smallest detail can take on a life of its own. And one of those details, one that has fueled suspicion, argument, and endless online debate, leads back to a mystery car that may have been seen at the crash site. It all comes down to a single question. What police vehicle showed up on Route 112 to respond the night Maura Murray vanished? And was it the only one? The first officer officially documented on scene that night was Sergeant Cecil Smith of the Haverhill Police Department. According to reports, he arrived at approximately 7:46 p.m., just minutes after the neighbor called 911 to report a single car crash. But when witnesses later described what they saw, the details just don't match. One neighbor told police the officer arrived in a red SUV, not the standard blue and white Haverhill cruiser most were familiar with. At the time, the department did have a red Ford Explorer in its fleet, a vehicle assigned to Sergeant Smith. But why would the responding officer be driving a red SUV? Were there other similar vehicles on duty that night? Could someone else have been out there first? That's on the next episode of Mystery and Murder, analysis by Dr. Phil. Plus, still to come, years later, a new twist reignited everything. A man came forward claiming that in a remote A-frame house not far from where Maura's car had crashed, he had found blood stains in the floorboards. He said the home had once belonged to someone connected to the earliest searches. All that and more on our next episode. Be sure you click to subscribe so you never miss watching an episode on YouTube or listen wherever you find your podcasts.